Good morning. Happy January 30th. I'm glad to see this one get by, right? How you doing today? You warm enough? There's this phenomenon going on where we're sort of like very much loaded to the right here. Not sure exactly what that's about, but we'll just roll with it. Well, good morning. Welcome to Blue Ridge Chapel on a Sunday morning. Any announcements that we have? So Children's Church is now a package deal, right? Literally, a package deal, yeah. And as time goes on, and we need more than that, we'll do more than that. Other announcements? Yes, Bill? It is cold outside this morning.
It was 9 on my car.
Indeed. David? Disaster auction, 20 and 21st of May. Excellent. All right, good.
Oh, and WARM tomorrow. Well, we're doing a meeting for WARM, just kind of a let's make sure we've got everything meeting at 6:15 tomorrow. So if anybody that's going to be helping or working with it, we'd love to have you come out.
That's right. If you're cooking, 6:15.
6:15 tomorrow.
Yeah. All right? Hey, we're launching Divorce Care tonight. We talked about it, I don't know, a month or two ago, and have been advertising, and we finally got a registration or two, and so we'll be launching that. So that starts at 6:30 this evening, so be in prayer as we go about that. Divorce Care is for folks who are, there are folks who can move through a divorce, and, you know, they kind of keep it all in, and the truth is they carry around the wounds of that for years, and there are others who, I'm glad to say, will step up and go, no, I'm going to ask for help. I'm going to get through this, and I'm going to be healthy on the other side, right? And Divorce Care is one of those ministries that helps folks to kind of deal with it and deal with it in a loving and a safe environment. And that's 6:30 this evening here.
I thought it was 6.
It's 6. What's wrong with me? It's 6. You just missed part of the video. But it's 6 o'clock. Here's the thing. If you know someone who's struggling, and that's an ongoing basis, you know, people are dropping in and out of relationships all the time. Point them our direction, 6 o'clock, and we'll be doing it for the next 13 weeks. Okay? All right, so we introduced a song last week that was a lot of fun, and we thought we'd just do it again. Now, we're a little short on our drummer this morning, so we need you to be the percussion again. Okay? Yeah, so if you will.
Okay.
Turn the bass up.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Come on now. Oh, I have days I lose the fight, try my best but don't get it right, see? Where I talk a talk that I don't walk and miss the moments right before my eyes. You're doing good. Somebody with a hurt that I could have helped, somebody with a hand that I could have held, when I just can't see past myself. Lord, help me be a little more like mercy, a little more like grace, a little more like kindness, goodness, love and faith, a little more like patience, a little more like peace, a little more like Jesus, a little less like me. Yeah, there's no denying I have changed. I've been saved from who I used to be. Even at my best, I must confess, I still need help to see the way you see. Somebody with a hurt that I could have helped. Somebody with a hand that I could have held. When I just can't see past myself, Lord, help me be a little more like mercy, a little more like grace, a little more like kindness, goodness, love and faith, a little more like patience, a little more like peace, a little more like Jesus, a little less like me. Oh, to be the baker on the street and love to be your hands and feet. Really give what I receive, Lord, help me be. I want to put you first above all else and love my neighbor as myself. In the moments no one sees, Lord, help me be. A little more like mercy, a little more like grace, a little more like kindness, goodness, love and faith, a little more like patience, a little more like peace, a little more like Jesus, a little less like me, a little more I'm living everything I breathe. A little more like Jesus, a little less like me.
One thing, the same God that never fails will not fail me now. You won't fail me now in the waiting. The same God who's never late is working all things out. You're working all things out. Yes, I will lift you high in the valley. Yes, I will touch your name. Yes, I will sing for joy when my heart is heavy all my days. Yes, I will. Count on one thing. The same God that never fails will not fail me now. You won't fail me now in the waiting. The same God who's never late is working all things out. You're working all things out. Yes, I will lift you high in the lowest valley. Yes, I will bless your name. Yes, I will sing for joy when my heart is heavy all my days. Yes, I will. I choose to praise, to glorify, glorify the name of all names. Nothing can stand against. I choose to praise, to glorify, glorify the name of all names. That nothing can stand against. Yes, I will lift you high in the lowest valley. Yes, I will bless your name. Yes, I will sing for joy when my heart is heavy all my days. Yes, I will all my days. Yes, I will all in the darkest hour, when I cannot breathe. Fear is on my chest, the weight of the world on me. Everything is crashing down, everything I have known. When I wonder if I'm all alone, I remember. You have always been faithful to me. I remember. Even when my own eyes could not see, you were there, always there. I will lift my eyes, even in the pain, above all the lies. I know you can make a way, 'cause I've seen giants fall, I have seen mountains move, I have seen waters part because of you. I remember. You have always been faithful to me. I remember. Even when my own eyes could not see, you were there, always there. Can't stop thinking about, I can't stop thinking about, I can't stop thinking about your goodness, goodness. I can't stop thinking about, I can't stop thinking about, I can't stop thinking about your goodness, goodness. I can't stop thinking about, I can't stop thinking about, I can't stop thinking about your goodness, goodness. I remember. You have always been faithful to me. I remember. Even when my own eyes could not see, you were there, always there with me.
You know the interesting thing, being a musician, if you have a guitar or something like that that you really love, you always remember the first time you ding it. We were here. Remember way back when we were practicing in somebody's basement. I had a brand new Takamine that I loved a lot. And I remember turning like this right into somebody's cymbal, right? Ding! Right on the headstock, right? Still remember to this day when it happened, where it happened. Yeah. We will pray for you, Mr. Martin. You will be fine. Yeah. Okay, so one more shot at Matthew 28, 16 through 20. Okay, for some of you, you're going, I'm almost at the point of gag reflex on this passage. Can we move on? One last week of this idea of are we willing? So I want to read it again, Matthew 28, 16 through 20. Then the 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain where Jesus had told them to go. And when they saw him, they worshiped him, but some doubted. And then Jesus came to them and said, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me, therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely I am with you always to the very end of the age. This morning, we've kind of talked a lot about what is the Great Commission and is it our commission and all that sort of thing. This morning, I just want to ask again a simple question. Last week was who are we willing to reach? Today is where are we willing to go? Okay, where are we willing to go? Verse 20 is clear. There's a four-letter word there that has massive implications for you and me. It's A-O-B-E-Y, obey. A part of being a disciple and making disciples is obedience. And obedience, simply put, is saying yes to God, right? Being willing means doing our best to always say yes to God. And that means yes, no matter what. And right off the bat, here's your first takeaway for this morning. Obedience isn't conditional. Maybe turn to the person next to you and go, holy moly, he started already. Obedience isn't conditional. It isn't about obeying when we feel like it. Right? It isn't obeying as long as we feel like it, and it won't cost us much. You remember the old song? I mean, this was like out of the 70s. There were some of you who weren't here then. But the old song, I have decided, right, to follow Jesus. I have decided to follow Jesus. Remember? I have decided to follow Jesus. No turning back, no turning back, right? Love that song. I remember when I first came to Christ, one of the things that was exciting to me was I had this sense, I was 12 years old, but I had this sense that if you get on this ride, it's going to take you places. Sometimes places that you're excited about, and sometimes places you didn't see yourself going. And some you didn't want to go, right? It's led me to some pretty interesting places, but to be honest, there's been a cost. I sometimes believe that when we tell people about Jesus, we play down the reality that there will be a cost. Following Jesus has cost me relationships. If you're one of those people, I can't be your friend. Okay. I'm one of those people, right? It's cost me monetarily. You can't follow Jesus and not eventually find your heart breaking for those who are in need. And so you give. Sometimes you give when you don't really have it to give, but you give. So it costs. It's cost me not living near my kids, my grandkids. That's not fun. So make no mistake, there is a cost in following Jesus. Is it worth it? Every time. Every time. The thing about ministry, it's a lot like an old saying. It's not how many seeds are in an apple. It's how many apples are in a seed. Right? When we determine that we're going to be obedient to Jesus, he goes, okay, watch this. And I'm going to just tell some stories this morning, if that's okay, just to kind of tell you maybe a little bit about what it's like for me and where he's had me to go. We always start with the question, when we're thinking about the Great Commission, is what does God want us to do here? Where does he want us to go? Let me just be clear. Had it been me in my life, I'd be in Tahiti right now. Full time. Right? So today's question is, again, where would he have us to go? And it's never about you or me, it's always about him. When you and I are prepared to say yes to Jesus, no matter what, some interesting things are going to happen. The last church that we were privileged to be a part of, God called me to start that church, and I was in my 40s when he called me. For the record, that's really old to be a church planter. That's like, I don't know, Tom Brady playing into his 50s. That's old in the NFL, right? I mean, he's in his 40s and some discussion about whether he's going to retire or not. But I was old to do that, but we promised God we'd say yes when he opened doors. And I will never forget driving. We were living in Leesburg, Virginia. I had this fat and happy job with a big church in Northern Virginia, and paid me way more money than I was worth. And I actually got to the intersection of 522 and 50 out in Winchester, and the Lord said, "You're home." And I pulled over and I called Barbara and I said, "You're not going to believe what I just heard," because we were looking at Denver, Colorado, and somewhere in Ohio and Winchester to start a church. He said, "This is it," right? It was the two of us. In a little while, we tripled the size of our church. We had 6. When we started the church, we had just over 20. Yeah. First Sunday, we had 132. Second Sunday, we had 80-some, and we kind of went from there, right? Let me fast forward 15 years in that church. At that point, we had started and helped to start 29 churches and a school scattered over 5 countries around the world. We started with no building, no money, and I don't share it to glorify me or the church, but to glorify God. He can do what he wants if we say yes. And he does some amazing things. All we did was look for opportunities and step through the door when he opened the door. All we did was just take a posture of yes, just a posture of obedience, right? And it all began with relationships. It's like we helped a guy start a church in Canada. He was a burnout Gen X pastor who swore he'd never pastor a church again. We wound up bringing on staff at our church, and eventually God called him to plant a church in a little place north of Toronto, Ontario, called Huntsville. If you've ever seen the TV show Northern Exposure, it could have been filmed there. You know, like mooses walking across Main Street, right? That kind of place, right? Beautiful place. The Kenyan church and the school that came out of that came from a relationship with someone that I had gone to seminary with. The Malawian and the Mozambique churches came out of relationships that started on the internet. I believe that, right? So again, let me just deep dive on a couple of these. I've had probably 3 experiences in my life that's absolutely shaped me to be who I am today. The first one I've talked a little bit about before, and I've talked about these stories before, forgive me, but it just makes sense to kind of talk about, if we're going to talk about where are we willing to go, let me tell you where I have been. The one that stressed me the most early on was the trip down to South America, down to Venezuela, down to a little village called Cochilowatelli. Cochilowatelli is out in the jungle. The people who live there are Yanomamo Indians. They're about this tall. I love it. I tower over them. I did not want to go. This church in Northern Virginia had a thriving missions ministry, and the word got out that they were putting a trip together to go down to Coach. And somebody said, "Well, you should go." And I go, I haven't been there. I didn't leave anything there. I don't need to go back. I'm grateful for the folks who are willing to go. And somebody said, "Well, what if somebody paid your way?" I said, "I don't know." 2 weeks later, he had a call from the missions office. "Oh, hey, by the way, you're good to go." Good to go where? Tahiti? No, Cochilowatelli, right? We had a pastor there, a missions pastor named Bernie Latour. He was just this awesome guy. And so Bernie and I are sitting next to each other. When we got on the plane, it was this Venezuelan Airlines called Cervevenza. These were back in the days when they flew with the cockpit door open, right? And, we launch from Miami, and almost immediately we have an engine fire. So they put the engine fire out. We go out over the glade, circle, dump a bunch of fuel, and land. And I'm like, Bernie, does that mean trip's over? He goes, no, watch this. So they parked that airplane here, loaded us on another airplane, and then they loaded other people back on this airplane. We saw them loading them. I'm like, are you kidding me? Anyhow, we were landing back in Miami, and Bernie turns to me and goes, we could have been martyrs. And I said, Bernie, I'm too young to be a martyr. I don't want to be a martyr. It's one of those. Anyhow, get down to Coachella. The airplanes kept getting smaller. We flew from Miami to Caracas down to a little place called San Fernando. And there we got on a Cessna 206, which is like a 6-seat airplane, right? Mission Aviation Fellowship. You're in trouble when the pilot gets in and puts a crash helmet on. True story. But my Lord. He turns to the guy next to him and goes, hey, fire extinguisher's under your seat. Turns back to me and says, first aid kit's under your seat. I'm going, this is all going wrong, So we're flying down, and all the guys are greasing up with 100% DEET, right? And I'm going, mine's in my bag. I'll just grease up when I get there. 2 minutes, Phil. 2 minutes after I got out of that airplane, I had blood running down my arm from the bugs, right? And I had 2 weeks of that to look forward to. It's a wonder I didn't have brain damage from taking the bath in DEET every day, right? Probably did. But one day we had some time, and before we left, we went upriver to visit a pagan village. And I stood there and I watched this. The families had, I figured, maybe $20 worth of worldly goods between their hammocks that they had made and the pots and pans that they cooked in. Nothing. Poorest of the poor. And I watched one of the missionaries, Mike Dawson, just kind of like hunkered down there at the campfire, just chatting with the Indians in their native tongue, Yanomama, which is really, really hard to learn. And my thought was, who in the world would give their whole life to a group of people nobody had ever known? Nobody knows these people. And I heard the Lord whisper, I know them. Go to the edge of the village, weep, repent, right? God moment. By the way, if you ever decide you want to go down there, we were down there to build homes for the missionaries because their homes had all flooded out, and we were building houses up the peninsula. I have pictures of the thermometer at 136 and 90% humidity. So you're up at 6 in the morning, you work till noon, you take till 3 in the afternoon, and then you work till dark, right? Most amazing experience I'd had to that point in my life. Fast forward. I'm in seminary. I meet a guy named Daniel Ngugi. He was from Kenya. He was here alone. His family was still in Gatanga, a little village there where he lived. And we helped him get his family to the States, right? And he'd been a part of our church. We were pastoring a church at that point. But we graduated from seminary, and I kind of lost track of him. I'm sitting at home one afternoon, and I read this newspaper article about the famine in East Africa, and I begin to cry. And I'm a pretty selfish guy, so I don't cry just that easily. But I kept saying to the Lord, I don't know anybody there. I don't know how to help. And he said, Daniel. I said, I haven't seen Daniel in 10 years. So I called the seminary. Hey, got any information on Daniel? Yeah, last time we heard he was in Kingsport, Tennessee. Here's his number. Oh, call the number. It's been disconnected. Okay, I tried. Give me an A for effort. I'm sitting at the intersection of like Route 50 and Apple Blossom Mall in Winchester 2 days later, and I'm just saying to the Lord, look, I tried. And he said, you didn't try 411. Dial 411. 2 minutes later, I'm talking to Daniel's wife, Jane. Jane says, he's in New Orleans doing Katrina relief, right? Okay, tell him I called, have him call me. What I didn't know was, at the time that I was sitting there bawling my eyes out, he was on his knees in New Orleans going, God, bring somebody to help my village. 2 days later, he calls me, he goes, Brother Mike, so good to hear from you. The Lord has told me we should work together. I said, this sounds like fun, sure. Next day he calls me, Brother Mike, the Lord has told me I should give you land in Kenya. Now this is part of land that was granted to his family by the British when they still ran the country. And he says, I'm going to give you land. Okay, good. What can I do with that? Condo? Next day he calls me and he goes, Brother Mike, the Lord has told me that we should start a school. And I said, what a setup, right? I don't know how many months later, 6 of us got on a plane, 3 women, 3 men, went to Gatanga. We got into Nairobi in the middle of the night. There was a crowd of people from the village there to welcome us. We went to the village the next day. We started working on the school. We thought we were going to build the school, and it became clear very quickly that they needed the jobs more than we needed the exercise. And so we actually hired a whole bunch of people from around the area to build the school. Fun part was, they said, it must be built by the 28th. And I said, why the 28th? He said, the rains will come. And I'm thinking, right. I said, how do you know the rains will come? Well, they did last year. Like, man, we need some of these guys in the States. Sure enough, we were putting the final windows into the building when the drops started to fall. On the 28th, right? I never wanted to go to Africa. I never wanted to go to Gatanga. Daniel died a few years ago, as a matter of fact. We still have some friends there. Then there was this work in Malawi and Mozambique. This started as somebody had sent me an email. You know, you get these random emails, and it was this guy. He had apparently been searching for a church in the U.S. to work with him, and he was in Blantyre, Malawi, and I thought, what is Malawi? Not even where was it? What is it? No idea where it was, right? We started to correspond, finally started talking every week on the phone, and then we decided that we should go and at least meet these people. So the fun part was, me and a friend named Rick, we were going to Kenya to check on the work there anyway, so we said, why don't we just fly south a little bit, and we'll see if these guys are legit, and who knows, maybe God's going to open up a door. I'll never forget, we land in Chileka Airport there in Blantyre, and being white guys, it's not too hard to find us, right? We kind of stood out. But there was a guy named Gray Nunca was his name, and Gray and some of his team came and met us, and we climbed into this van, and they had the back seats all taken out of the van, and so Rick and I are sitting back there with our backs against the back door, with our bags in front of us, and 4 of these Africans staring at us. And I turned over and I whispered to Rick, I said, if these guys aren't legit, we'll be shallow graves in 2 hours. It was probably the most faith-filled, risky thing that we'd ever done to that point. We got to the hotel, we wound up in a gazebo, and these men began to pour out their dreams for God's work in their world, in their community. And they had a particular dream to reach the villages, the rural areas. A lot of guys were building big churches in the cities. Nobody wanted to go the distance. And I caught this vision that they had. And so we wound up again, starting a whole bunch of churches there and training a bunch of pastors. And never forget, I had been to one village a number of times, and then I had been like 2 years since I'd been there. And the pastor of that church there was Pastor Frederick. And Gray kept saying to me, you need to come back. Frederick's not happy. Okay. So we flew back. We went out to Magalita, where he was the pastor. And Frederick goes, Pastor Mike, where have you been? We need you. And so you haven't lived until you've had an African reading you the riot act, right? They just had this heart for reaching everybody they could possibly reach in their area for Jesus. And we went there a bunch, and it's like a second home. I tried to buy a house there once. They don't let non-Malawans buy houses there. There is a spirit of peace in that country when you land. That is like, and I'm not that discerning, but when I land there, it's like, wow, peace. It's one of the poorest countries in the world. It's like, I think, the 8th poorest in the world. But some of the most amazing, loving people. Now, I share those stories to say this. I didn't want to or plan to go to any of those places. But if you commit to saying yes to God and pay attention, He's going to open doors. As individuals and as churches, He will open doors. We become impoverished when we say no or when we stop walking through those doors. And I share those stories to say that God can call us literally anywhere we're willing to go. My experience is it's not about where, it's about willing. Okay? And again, maybe today God isn't calling us to a global effort. Or maybe He is. I'm literally right now praying about a return trip to Kenya to see some friends out in West Kenya. Anybody want to take a trip? Let me know. Be about 10 days or so. It'd be fun. I'll have you preaching. But here's the thing. In some ways, it's easier to go global than it is to go local. You know why? If you blow it globally, you just come home and start over. If you blow it locally, everybody knows. And I don't know what blow it looks like. I'm just saying, if it just doesn't turn out the way you thought it would, you hoped it would, if it's overseas, it's like, in 2 weeks, nobody knows anymore, right? But maybe He's calling us to go somewhere right here in Augusta County that we don't normally go. Sometimes, heck, maybe thinking of going out into the world right now is preposterous anyway, between COVID and everything else that's going on. Maybe this is the influence, if you will, to make us think locally. But guys, here's what I know. If we let it, there will always be something to keep us from going. You notice? Luke chapter 9, verse 59 through 62. Says, as they were walking along the road, a man said to him, I will follow you wherever you go. Jesus, I'm saying yes. And Jesus replies, not with great. Sign here, press hard, 3 copies. He says, foxes have dens and birds have nests, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head. As if to say, you still interested? Then he said to another man, you, follow me. And he replied, Lord, first let me go and bury my father. That seems appropriate, right? And Jesus responds, I've always pondered this, now that's cold. But you go and proclaim the kingdom of God. Still another said, I will follow you, Lord, but. Is that a familiar refrain? I will follow you anywhere, Lord, but. First, let me go back and say goodbye to my family. And Jesus says, no one who puts their hands to the plow and looks back is fit for the service in the kingdom of God. It's a hard teaching of Jesus. Now, here's what I think. I think Jesus heard this a lot. I'll go anywhere. When you're leaving, I'll be right there. And Jesus is saying, this is not an easy life. Foxes and birds have a place to live. I don't. Still want to sign up. Are you still willing to follow me anywhere? And then he calls this other guy to follow, and the guy says, hey, my dad just died. Let me go attend to the burial. Now, in my book, as excuses go, that's pretty good. When my dad passed away, my world stopped for a while, right? But here's what was really going on there. The guy wasn't saying his dad had just died. He was saying, I have to look after my father until he dies. That's that culture. That the kids were their social security, right? Jesus, on the other hand, responds in a way that, again, feels pretty harsh. You, I'm calling you, now, go. Jesus sums all this up. No one who is fit for service in the kingdom. Now, here's the thing. Jesus isn't describing a glance back. Who hasn't gotten behind a rototiller in their garden and doing this, and all of a sudden they look to one side or the other, but they're still trying to plow a straight line. He wasn't talking about a glance back. He's talking about someone who starts to move in one direction, but their attention is somewhere else. Right? The idea here is someone who's mouthing the words, I'll follow you. But practically, they're not focusing on him at all. Their mind, their thoughts, their passions, they're all centered elsewhere. And he points out something very hard here. If we can't stay focused on the mission at hand and the calling at hand, then we're not going to be fruitful in the kingdom of God. Okay? Now, there's another truth that's buried here. If you're one of those folks that has a past, you know who you are. If you've made mistakes that's caused you to think that you're unqualified for the kingdom, unqualified to follow him, hear me. The only way you will ever follow Jesus is to stop looking back and to look to him, to look to what he's calling us to, right? Remember, when the devil reminds you of your past, what do? It's future, right? Similar, Jesus speaks to this in Matthew 6:24. He says, no one can serve two masters. You're going to either hate the one and love the other, or you'll be devoted to the one and despise the other. You can't serve both God and money. It's a money passage, but he's talking about we can't be sold out to two different things. Have you noticed? Not that I'd want to be, but you can't be a Steeler fan and a Baltimore fan. Doesn't work that way. Matthew 6:21 says, where your treasure is, that's where your heart's going to be. Right? Whatever we value most, that's where our heart and our passion and our loyalty and our energy will be. Whatever we value most. And when it comes to Jesus, guys, either we follow him or we don't. It's as simple as that. So, where will we go? Let's go back to this idea for a moment of going into all the world. I really don't believe that Jesus intended all of us to go into all the world. What he was saying was, be prepared to go where I send you. For some of us, it's going to be right here. For some of us, it might be on the other side of the earth. Be prepared to go. If you recall, Peter was called to reach the Jews. He never went after the Gentiles. He went after the Jews. He was determined to convert all the Jews he knew to Jesus. Paul, on the other hand, after a while stopped going to the Jews and devoted his life to only speaking to the Gentiles, right? One wasn't better than the other. They were simply called to different people, right? Now, it's up to you and me to listen and to discern. For those who weren't a part of the board meeting yesterday, we had a fascinating church board meeting yesterday, and we started talking about some